The room felt colder than it should have been. The lights at NBC Studios in Burbank hummed softly overhead, bouncing off polished floors that had witnessed decades of television history. A 21-year-old Michael Jackson sat forward in his chair, hands folded, eyes glowing with the same reverence a student gives a master. Across from him sat Fred Astaire, 79 years old, sharp-eyed, legendary, untouchable. When Fred finally spoke, his words didn't come as praise. They came like a quiet strike. "Try ballet," he said, almost amused. "That'll break you, I doubt you will." In that moment, something cracked inside Michael Jackson, and something else was born. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss another untold story. Michael Jackson had grown up idolizing Fred Astaire. To him, Astaire wasn't just a dancer. He was elegance incarnate, precision, control. A man who could glide across a floor as if gravity had made a special exception just for him. When Michael finally met his hero in 1980, he expected encouragement, maybe advice, maybe even validation. What he received instead felt like dismissal. Fred Astaire's tone wasn't cruel, but it was sharp, almost playful in its doubt. And that doubt cut deeper than any insult. Michael smiled politely in the moment. He always did. Cameras were nearby. People were watching. But inside, the words echoed. "That'll break you." Fred Astaire didn't know it then, but he had unknowingly lit a fuse inside the most driven performer of the modern era. At that point in his life, Michael Jackson was already a global star. Off the Wall had redefined pop music. Crowds screamed his name. The world saw him as unstoppable, but Michael didn't see himself that way. He saw gaps, weaknesses, limits, and ballet, classical ballet, represented everything he wasn't supposed to touch. Ballet was discipline without applause, pain without screaming fans, technique so unforgiving that ego meant nothing. And so, quietly, Michael Jackson made a decision that would change dance history forever. No press release announced it, no manager approved it, no friends were told. Michael Jackson found a strict Russian ballet instructor living quietly in Los Angeles, trained in a system that didn't care about fame or fortune. This instructor agreed to take him on under one condition: absolute secrecy. No entourage, no bodyguards, no special treatment, just work. 3 mornings a week, starting at 6 a.m., Michael Jackson slipped into a small, unremarkable studio before the city woke up. He wore plain clothes, no sunglasses, no gloves, no sparkle. Inside those mirrored walls, he was Michael Jackson, the superstar. He was just a student, one who struggled, slipped, failed, and started again. Ballet didn't welcome him, it rejected him. The positions hurt his ankles, his calves burned, his toes cramped. The turnout demanded by classical ballet felt unnatural to someone whose body had been shaped by street dance, rhythm, and instinct. The Russian instructor was merciless. Corrections were sharp. Praise was rare. Michael was told his posture was wrong, his balance unstable, his control inconsistent. At times, he left the studio in silence, jaw clenched, pain screaming through muscles no audience had ever seen. But he came back. Week after week, month after month, for 2 years. The world watched Michael Jackson evolve musically, unaware that something else was happening in the shadows. Ballet trained his core to stabilize movement. It taught him how to shift weight invisibly, how to float between steps, how to make effort disappear. His instructor drilled him on pliés, relevés, and slow transitions that demanded total body awareness. Michael began to understand something profound. Movement wasn't about speed. It was about control. And control changed everything. Late at night, after rehearsals and recordings, Michael would practice alone. He studied how Fred Astaire seemed to slide across floors without friction. He replayed memories of dancers who looked like they were moving forward while traveling backward. He experimented, failed, adjusted. Ballet had taught him how to cheat gravity, how to hide effort, how to sell illusion. The moonwalk didn't arrive in a flash of inspiration. It emerged slowly, painfully, through repetition. Michael learned how to keep his upper body calm while his feet told a different story. Ballet had trained his balance so precisely that he could transfer weight without visible shift. His heel placements, ankle strength, and center alignment came directly from those secret morning sessions. What looked like magic was actually mathematics, physics applied through discipline. And still no one knew. Not the media, not the fans, not even many people in his inner circle. In March 1983, the world gathered around their television screens for Motown 25. Michael Jackson stepped onto the stage wearing a black jacket, a fedora, and a quiet confidence that felt different. When the beat of Billie Jean began, something changed in the room. Every movement felt deliberate. Every pause held tension. Then, in a moment that rewired pop culture forever, Michael Jackson slid backward while appearing to walk forward. The moonwalk. Time stopped. Audiences screamed. Cameras shook. Dancers around the world froze in disbelief. No one had seen anything like it, not like this. Not executed with such smoothness, such illusion, such control. The move looked effortless, impossible, otherworldly. Behind the scenes, Fred Astaire watched. The phone rang not long after. Michael Jackson answered, unsure of what to expect. On the other end was his childhood idol, voice trembling. Fred Astaire was crying. "You proved me wrong," he said. "I didn't think you'd do it, but you did. You went further than I ever imagined." Michael didn't tell him about the ballet classes. Not then, maybe not ever. The secret had served its purpose. What the world called innovation was actually devotion. What fans saw as natural genius was built on unseen sacrifice. Ballet hadn't broken Michael Jackson. It had rebuilt him. The moonwalk became the most iconic dance move in history, not because it was flashy, but because it was precise. It embodied illusion, control, and emotion in perfect balance. And at its core were hundreds of quiet mornings, aching muscles, and a young man determined to turn doubt into destiny. Michael Jackson understood something few artists ever do. True transformation often happens where no one is watching. That's the real story behind the moonwalk. Not a trick, not an accident, but a secret journey born from a single sentence meant as a joke and answered with relentless discipline. And yet, even after Motown 25, even after the moonwalk detonated across the planet like a cultural earthquake, the story still wasn't over. In many ways, it was only beginning. Because what most people never realized was this: the moonwalk was not the destination. It was proof of concept. Michael Jackson did not see that moment as the peak of his evolution. He saw it as confirmation that discipline could unlock miracles, that secrecy could protect growth, that humiliation, when swallowed quietly, could become power. The applause that night was deafening, but inside Michael's mind something else echoed louder, the memory of being told, "I doubt you will." That sentence never left him. After Motown 25, the world changed how it spoke about Michael Jackson. Critics stopped calling him a talented singer who danced well. They began using words like phenomenon, visionary, and unrepeatable. Dancers rewound VHS tapes until the footage blurred. Children practiced sliding across kitchen floors in socks. Professionals argued endlessly about how the move worked. Was it about friction? About shoes? About timing? Almost no one mentioned ballet. Michael made sure of that. He understood the power of mystery. If people believed the moonwalk was pure magic, they would stop looking for its bones. They would never see the scaffolding underneath. And Michael Jackson guarded that scaffolding fiercely. The ballet classes continued quietly even after Motown 25, though less frequently. Now they weren't about learning. They were about refinement, about maintaining the control that had taken years to build. The Russian instructor noticed the difference immediately. Michael's posture had transformed. His balance was no longer fragile, it was surgical. He could stop mid-motion and hold stillness like a sculpture. Ballet had given him something most pop dancers lacked: restraint. Restraint became his secret weapon. As Michael Jackson prepared for the Victory Tour and later the Bad Era, his choreography evolved into something sharper, more architectural. Every spin landed with precision. Every freeze looked deliberate, not accidental. The moonwalk itself began to morph, sometimes slower, sometimes sharper, sometimes barely hinted at, as if Michael was teasing the audience with what they wanted most. He had learned something critical from ballet: giving less can make people feel more. Behind closed doors, Michael studied anatomy books. He wanted to understand how muscles fired, how joints aligned, how tension traveled through the body. Ballet had introduced him to the idea that the body was an instrument that could be tuned. Now he wanted mastery, not just of steps, but of mechanics. This obsession worried people around him. They saw the exhaustion, the bruises, the way he would rehearse alone long after dancers had gone home. They heard him mutter counts under his breath, correcting himself even when no one else could see a flaw. But Michael Jackson wasn't chasing perfection for applause. He was chasing silence, the silence that comes when movement aligns perfectly with intention. That silence had first appeared in the ballet studio. Years later, dancers who worked closely with Michael would describe moments that felt almost unreal. He could demonstrate a move once and remember it forever. He could alter choreography on the spot to suit camera angles, stage size, or emotional tone. He knew exactly how much energy to give and when to pull back. These weren't instincts alone. They were trained responses. The moonwalk, stripped of myth, was ballet logic disguised as street poetry. The backward glide depended on weight transfer, so clean that the audience couldn't see it. Ballet teaches dancers to shift weight invisibly, to let one foot release while the other carries the body. Michael applied that principle sideways, backward, diagonally. He hid the labor inside elegance. Fred Astaire recognized this immediately when he watched Motown 25. That was why he cried. Not because he was impressed, but because he understood the cost. Astaire had lived that cost. He knew how many mornings it took, how many failures, how many private humiliations. He knew what it meant to make something look easy that was anything but. In Michael Jackson, he saw not a copy, not a student, but a successor who had translated classical discipline into a new language. And yet, Michael never spoke publicly about ballet. Why? Because ballet to him was sacred. It wasn't a marketing angle. It wasn't a trivia fact. It was the furnace where doubt had been burned away. To expose it felt like exposing something too intimate. Michael Jackson believed that magic should remain mysterious, even if it was built on sweat. As the 1980s progressed, the influence of ballet deepened. Watch Michael Jackson closely during live performances and rehearsals. Notice the turnout of his feet during spins, the way his knees softened before explosive movement, the vertical alignment of his torso, even during aggressive choreography. These are ballet fundamentals, repurposed for pop. Even his stillness, the iconic freezes, were rooted in ballet's demand for control at rest. The world called it style, Michael called it work. During the dangerous era, his choreography became more complex, more layered. The movements told stories, not just rhythms. Ballet had taught him narrative through motion, how to express emotion without words. Anger, longing, defiance, vulnerability, all could live inside posture and timing. Michael Jackson began choreographing not just dances, but emotional arcs. Still, the secret remained buried. In private moments, Michael would sometimes joke about Fred Astaire's comment. He said ballet would break me, he'd laugh softly, but there was no bitterness in his voice, only gratitude, because without that doubt, he might never have gone looking for what he didn't have. That single sentence had redirected his entire physical philosophy. As the 1990s unfolded, the moonwalk became mythologized beyond reality. People claimed it was invented overnight, that it was stolen, that it was a trick shoe. Michael Jackson let the stories grow wild. They protected the truth. But truth has a way of surfacing. In rare, unguarded moments, Michael hinted at the discipline behind his art. He spoke about isolation, about studying, about learning from places no one expected. Those who listened closely could hear Ballet hiding between the words. When younger dancers asked him for advice, he didn't tell them to chase fame. He told them to study fundamentals, to learn control, to master balance before flash. Those were Ballet principles translated into Michael's voice. By the time of this is it rehearsals, decades later, the influence was undeniable. Even in his later years, Michael Jackson moved with a clarity most dancers half his age couldn't match. His posture remained regal, his balance precise, his musicality razor-sharp. Ballet had aged him differently. It had preserved something essential. And still, the story wasn't public. Michael Jackson passed away without ever fully revealing the extent of his secret training. The world mourned the loss of a king, unaware of the quiet student who had risen before dawn to be told he wasn't good enough. It wasn't until years later that fragments of the truth emerged, whispers from instructors, offhand comments from collaborators, patterns noticed by dancers trained in classical technique. Slowly, the puzzle assembled itself. The moonwalk was not born on a stage. It was born in a studio, in pain, in silence. And Fred Astaire's joke had been the spark. There is something profoundly human about this story, not because it's about greatness, but because it's about response. Michael Jackson could have shrugged off Fred Astaire's doubt. He could have dismissed Ballet as irrelevant. He could have leaned on his natural gifts and coasted. Instead, he chose the hardest possible path. He chose to become a beginner again. That choice is what separates talent from legacy. Michael Jackson didn't just want to entertain, he wanted to transcend. Ballet gave him the architecture to build something eternal. The moonwalk became a symbol not of ease, but of hidden effort, of how beauty is often forged where no one is applauding. And perhaps that is why the move still mesmerizes us today. Because on some level, we feel the truth beneath it. We sense the discipline even if we don't name it. We recognize the illusion and the honesty coexisting in the same moment. The moonwalk looks like freedom, but it is powered by control. That paradox was Michael Jackson. As long as people dance, the moonwalk will be attempted, imitated, and admired. But very few will ever replicate what made it iconic, not the step, but the journey behind it. Fred Astaire's doubt didn't stop Michael Jackson. It refined him. It pushed him into the shadows where real work happens. It taught him that the most powerful transformations are invisible until the moment they are. And when the world finally saw the result, it changed everything. What happened after that is rarely discussed, because it doesn't fit the myth people prefer. The myth says that once Michael Jackson changed the world with the moonwalk, everything became effortless. That he had reached some untouchable summit where inspiration flowed freely and genius no longer struggled. The truth is far more uncomfortable and far more powerful. The moonwalk didn't free Michael Jackson, it trapped him. From that night forward, every step he took on stage was measured against a single backward glide. Audiences didn't just want to see Michael dance, they wanted to see that moment again and again. The very illusion he had built through 2 years of hidden ballet discipline became a cage made of applause. Michael felt it immediately. In rehearsals after Motown 25, he became more withdrawn, not because he was unhappy with success, but because he understood its weight. The moonwalk was no longer his secret. It belonged to the world now, and the world doesn't protect what it consumes, it demands more. So Michael Jackson went back to the one place that had never betrayed him: discipline. He returned to fundamentals with an almost obsessive intensity. While choreographers pitched bigger, flashier moves, Michael stripped things down. He studied silence in movement. He asked himself how stillness could be louder than motion. Ballet had taught him that pauses could speak as clearly as steps, and now he wanted to weaponize that knowledge. This was when his performances began to feel almost confrontational. Watch him during the Bad Tour. There are moments when he simply stands, breathing, staring into the crowd while tens of thousands scream. That wasn't ego. That was control. Ballet trains dancers to own space without filling it. Michael Jackson learned how to let anticipation become part of the choreography. He wasn't just dancing anymore. He was conducting emotion. Behind the scenes, his daily routine remained brutal. Stretching sessions lasted hours. Warm-ups were non-negotiable. His feet, those same feet that had learned to deceive the human eye, were constantly injured. Blisters, inflammation, stress fractures. Ballet had strengthened them, but it had also pushed them beyond normal limits. Michael rarely complained. Pain, to him, was information. Ballet had taught him to listen to it, not fear it. He knew the difference between injury and resistance, between danger and growth. That knowledge kept him going long after others would have stopped. Those closest to him noticed something unsettling. Michael Jackson rehearsed like someone who was still trying to prove himself. Not to critics, not to fans, to an invisible judge inside his own mind. Fred Astaire's voice lingered there. "I doubt you will." That sentence became a measuring stick. Every new movement had to answer it. Every performance had to justify the hours spent alone in studios while the world slept. And Michael never let himself forget that ballet had once rejected him. He respected it too much. As new generations of dancers emerged, many tried to copy Michael Jackson's style. They mimicked the moonwalk, the spins, the sharp isolations. But something was always missing. Their movements lacked weight, or restraint, or inevitability. They hadn't built the foundation. Ballet is unforgiving because it doesn't allow shortcuts. Michael Jackson understood that before he understood fame. Ballet had stripped him of celebrity and reduced him to mechanics. It had taught him humility in the most physical way possible. That humility shaped how he collaborated. Michael listened deeply to musicians, choreographers, and designers. He absorbed ideas, filtered them through his own discipline, and refined them until they aligned with his vision. He didn't dominate rooms by shouting. He did it by clarity, by knowing exactly what he wanted and why. This clarity became more evident during the dangerous era, when his movement vocabulary expanded into something darker, sharper, more percussive. Ballet had taught him how to contrast softness with aggression. The snap of a movement only mattered because it came from stillness. Audiences felt that contrast viscerally. Michael Jackson wasn't just entertaining people. He was regulating their nervous systems, pulling them into tension, then releasing it. Ballet had given him access to that kind of control. Still, he kept the secret. Even when journalists asked directly about his influences, Michael deflected. He spoke about street dancers, about rhythm, about inspiration. All true, but incomplete. Ballet remained his private language, spoken only through movement. There is a reason for that. Ballet is about submission to structure before transcendence. It demands obedience before freedom. Michael Jackson, a man who spent his life fighting for autonomy, found paradoxical liberation in its rigidity. In ballet, rules were not prisons. They were ladders. He climbed them quietly. As the 1990s progressed, the industry around Michael grew louder, faster, more commercial. Everything pushed towards spectacle, bigger stages, louder effects, more shock. Michael resisted in subtle ways. He insisted on rehearsals that focused on alignment, balance, and breath. Things audiences never consciously noticed, but always felt. When younger dancers joined his teams, many were shocked. They expected chaos or indulgence. Instead, they found structure, discipline, long sessions correcting posture and timing. Michael Jackson didn't demand obedience. He demanded awareness. That demand came straight from ballet. Some dancers quit, others stayed and transformed. Michael didn't explain why it mattered. He simply showed them. He would demonstrate a movement, then adjust it by millimeters until it felt inevitable. He knew when something was right not because it looked good, but because it felt quiet inside his body. That internal quiet was rare. As his fame grew heavier, Michael retreated further inward. Public misunderstandings multiplied. Noise surrounded him. Through all of it, movement remained his anchor. Ballet had given him a place to return to when language failed. Even during moments of intense scrutiny, Michael rehearsed. Always rehearsed. Movement was how he processed emotion. Anger became sharp isolations. Sadness softened his phrasing. Fear tightened his control. Ballet had taught him that the body could speak truths the voice could not. This is why his performances resonate long after the music ends. They carry emotional logic. Toward the later years of his life, Michael Jackson's physical fragility became more apparent. The body that had endured decades of extreme discipline was worn, and yet his control remained astonishing. Even when energy waned, precision did not. Ballet preserves coordination even as strength fades. That is not accidental. During this is-it rehearsals, those present witness something haunting. Michael moved gently, economically, but with absolute clarity. Every gesture had purpose. Every transition was clean. He no longer needed spectacle. He was the spectacle. Ballet had taught him how to reduce without losing meaning. When he spoke about wanting to heal the world, people often interpreted it as idealism. But watch his movement closely. He wasn't trying to overwhelm audiences. He was trying to attune them, to bring them into rhythm with something deeper than sound. The moonwalk, in hindsight, was a doorway. Not into fame, that was already there, but into a different relationship with gravity, time, and self. It marked the moment Michael Jackson fused classical discipline with popular expression so completely that the seams disappeared. Fred Astaire understood this instantly. That is why his reaction mattered more than any headline. One master recognized another, not through words, but through the evidence of work. Astaire had not been proven wrong by talent. He had been proven wrong by commitment. Michael Jackson never corrected him. He never revealed the secret. He let the world believe whatever it wanted, because the truth didn't need witnesses. It had already done its work. And that work lives on. Every dancer who studies fundamentals before flash, every artist who chooses anonymity over applause to grow, every creator who answers doubt with discipline rather than defensiveness is echoing that hidden journey. The moonwalk is iconic not because it defies physics, but because it honors them. It respects the body, it respects effort, it respects time. Michael Jackson respected all three. That is why his legacy endures beyond trends, beyond eras, beyond imitation. You can copy steps. You cannot copy devotion. The real lesson of this story is not about ballet. It is about response. About what happens when a young artist hears, "I doubt you will," and chooses to listen, not with resentment but with resolve. Michael Jackson listened. Then he went to work. And the world is still sliding backward in awe. And even after everything we've uncovered so far, even after tracing the moonwalk back to those silent mornings and unforgiving mirrors, there is still a deeper layer most people never consider. Because Michael Jackson's secret ballet journey didn't just change how he danced. It changed how he thought about legacy. Once you understand that, his entire career begins to look different. After the moonwalk became immortal, Michael Jackson quietly shifted his definition of success. He stopped chasing moments and started building systems. He wasn't interested in single shocking moves anymore. He wanted a body of work that could not be dismantled by time. Ballet had taught him that real mastery is invisible structure. You don't notice it unless it's missing. This is why, starting in the late 1980s, Michael became increasingly involved in every detail of his performances. Lighting cues, camera angles, stage spacing, footwear design. People around him thought he was being obsessive. In reality, he was protecting alignment. Ballet had trained him to understand that one small misalignment could collapse the illusion. The moonwalk only worked because everything else was controlled. Michael began designing shoes with soles that allowed specific friction levels, not to cheat, but to ensure consistency. Ballet dancers obsess over point shoes for the same reason. Equipment doesn't replace technique, but it can betray it if ignored. Michael Jackson treated pop performance with the same seriousness classical dancers treat the stage. This mindset separated him from everyone else. Other artists chased novelty. Michael chased coherence. When choreographers brought him routines that looked impressive but lacked internal logic, he rejected them. He wasn't impressed by difficulty alone. Ballet had taught him that difficulty without clarity is noise. He wanted movement that read cleanly from the back row and the camera lens alike. This is why his dances look simple when described, but impossible when attempted. The simplicity is earned. Another rarely discussed consequence of Michael's ballet training was how it reshaped his relationship with silence. Ballet teaches dancers to count music internally, even when no sound is present. Michael mastered this. He could dance perfectly offbeat, then snap back into rhythm with surgical precision. That ability made his timing feel supernatural. Audiences thought he was improvising. He was. He was listening to an internal metronome forged through years of discipline. This internal timing allowed Michael Jackson to manipulate crowd energy in ways no performer had done before. He could delay a movement just long enough to stretch anticipation to the breaking point. He could enter late and still feel inevitable. Ballet had taught him that arriving late can be more powerful than arriving on time if you control the space. That control is why crowds screamed before he even moved. They felt what was coming. As Michael grew older, his respect for foundational training deepened. He encouraged young dancers to study classical forms, even if they never intended to perform them publicly. "Learn control," he would say, "then you can break it." That philosophy was pure ballet. But he never framed it as ballet. He framed it as survival. Because Michael Jackson understood something brutal about fame. The spotlight burns hotter than people realize. Natural talent gets consumed quickly. Only structure lasts. Ballet had given him structure strong enough to survive pressure that destroyed others. This is also why Michael was so private about his process. He had seen how quickly the world trivializes discipline once it becomes visible. Mystery protected meaning. If people believed the moonwalk was magic, they wouldn't dismantle it into tricks. They would feel it instead. Michael preferred feeling over explanation. That preference shaped how history remembers him. Even today, debates rage about how the moonwalk works. People slow down footage. They argue about angles and friction. They miss the point entirely. The move works because the body is organized correctly from the inside out. Ballet taught Michael Jackson how to organize himself. That organization extended beyond dance. It influenced how he structured albums, tour, and even silence between releases. He understood packing. He knew when to disappear and when to return. Ballet teaches dancers that rest is part of performance. Without recovery, technique collapses. If this continuation has deepened your appreciation of Michael Jackson beyond the surface, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with those who believe magic appears out of nowhere. Because behind every timeless moment is a quiet choice, to work when no one is watching, and to keep going even when someone you admire doubts you.